Good morning, everyone here in the audience and obviously in Turku and Tampere as well. Warmly welcome to this workshop run by Oki Talk today. This is part of a project funded by the Ecosystems of Growth, Digitalization and Growth Services. And today we have Oki Talk here talking about how to build a successful business model and a thriving team at the same time. Quite a big question, right? And today we are receiving a good answer to this question from Oki. He has 20 years of entrepreneurial experience and he's passionate about startups. Please give you a warm welcome to Oki.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, two very small questions that we're seeking the answer to today, building a successful business model and also a thriving team at the same time. To be honest, nobody can at this very moment answer both of these questions in any way accurately. We have guesses, we have thoughts, we have theories, we have processes and we have tools, but we have no definite answers of how to exactly do these things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pour all my experience into the next 3 hours of what I think and I believe, and others believe too, that are pretty good ways of trying to achieve these two things. These two things are the lean startup theory or the lean startup methodology, and then what I call lamely team building. But the team building part is something that we actually go pretty deep into today also. So my name is Oki. I love startups, I love innovation, I love a few things about them, keywords going towards vulnerability and curiosity. And those are actually the main two tools that we're going to explore today. In the guise of, or in the disguise of lean startup and team building. I've been mentoring quite a many startups. I think I lost count at about 800. I've run a few incubation programs. I've created maybe 10. And I just love doing this job. So I'm happy to be here sharing these things together with you. This is basically going to be our theme today. So we're going to take a peek in the beginning to the rabbit hole of this business model building and team building. And with this peek, I just want to kind of take a look at why do these startups fail. And then we'll go deeper into the rabbit hole and let's see where we emerge. So why does a startup fail? It's an age-old question. There's many answers to this. I like this specific one the most. A startup runs out of its resources before being able to actually build a working business model. That's an easy kind of a getaway answer to the question. But it begs the question that why does that actually happen? Why isn't then a team able to actually build a successful business model before it runs out of the resources, the funding it raised, or maybe some mental humane resources like just having to give up because you've run out of energy? Usually the reason is that there is this runway, there is this time that the startup has to figure things out, and if they can't do it in time, you could say that, well, you did it too slow. You weren't fast enough in learning how to actually build this business model. But why does this then happen? Why don't teams learn fast enough to build a working business model in time? Well, basically, before even going to this assumptions thing, the back reason is that the team actually builds something for the end users that the end users don't give a rat's ass enough about, and thus cannot sell its products to the customers. So, in other words, the team is solving too small of a problem for maybe too small group of a people to make the business model work. And this happens because as startup entrepreneurs, we, as every human being, we assume things. We assume that my idea is the greatest one in the world, and I'm going to build it to these people. They're going to pay this much. They're going to forget about their existing ways of doing things, and they're going to embrace mine because mine is cheaper or mine is more efficient in getting the job done. And while we assume these things, they of course feel great for us founders. But if we don't validate them, if we don't really find out if our assumptions are correct before building it into a product, then we usually run into problems. We build products that people don't give a rat's ass about. So why does that happen then? Why do we build things based on our own assumptions that ultimately lead to startup failures? Here I think we're venturing into pretty interesting waters. So us human beings, we've been built, evolution has kind of built us so that the main thing for our body is to keep itself safe. So we're looking for safety in many ways. Back in the days, it was running from tigers and lions and other predators. And nowadays, it's running from, for example, in a startup founder's life, it's running from potential rejection by our end users. So biologically, it's pretty much the same thing if we see a tiger or if we see a potential end user that might refuse us or say no to us or our product. It's the basic fear that happens. And that fear drives our behavior so that we're not going to talk to the end user first because it doesn't feel safe. We kind of want to tinker with a product a little bit. We want to make great, beautiful features to it so that it looks good and seems good, and then we can show it to the customer. But those tinkerings, those features are usually assumptions that we've just made. We thought that this is going to be the most beautiful thing. We're going to build it and show it to the users and hope they will buy. So our body has been built on this reward system of safe is good. And now what I'm asking you to do is be okay with it. That, okay, yeah, it feels unsecure as hell. I'm afraid of going to talk to the end users. What if they steal my idea? Or what if they say no? Or what if they laugh at me? You kind of need to build the skill of being okay with those feelings to go through this whole validation thing. Well, we're going to get back to these things quite a lot during today. So if this feels a lot, that's fine. This was just a peek into the rabbit hole. So the safety, of course, we know that building a startup includes risks. There's no way around it. If we're building something new, if we're building something that hasn't been built before, if we're trying to solve a problem that hasn't been solved well before, well, we need to build something new. And that includes that there's risk, that we might be building something that doesn't bring the value we think it should. Your job as a startup founder is really to reduce these risks. It is to enhance your odds of success. And we're going to take a look at these two things, lowering down the risks and getting your success rate higher through this lean startup methodology in the beginning. And then we're going to look at things from the team building perspective. And one thing here that's good to keep in mind, that your risk level, of course, varies. Let's say you're building something that exists already, but you're tweaking it just a little bit. The risk level is quite low because you can basically copy-paste the existing model of this working company that you're copying from, and then just validate this small part that you're tweaking. But if you're completely building something new that has never been done before, you have quite a lot of things to validate. You have quite a lot of things to test and make sure that does it work or not. So you could say that your risk level is quite high. All right. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat. Hannu here is going to relay those questions to me. And I actually hope that we can have a discussion because, to be honest, I can talk about these things for 8 days straight. So feel free to interrupt me whenever you want. Also in the audience, questions are good. We'd love to have a discussion. All right. So if we take a look at things from another perspective, talking about now, this very moment, the idea today is to figure out what kind of tools and processes will serve you best in your own startup journey. The job of those tools and processes is to help you build the culture that you believe will make your company great. That sounded like Trump. I gotta take those words back. Let's not talk about great. Successful, for example. How to make your startup a successful one. How to make it enjoyable also for you. How to make it fun. And through these steps, I believe that then it is way more reasonable, way more easier to actually get to your goal, get to that purpose of yours. All right. So if I would rephrase today's main theme with this, trying to figure out the business model, trying to figure out the thriving team, it boils down really to this. It boils down to accelerating your learning speed, which sounds maybe a bit gibberishy in the beginning, but what it actually means that to accelerate your learning speed, as a startup founder, you have to in the beginning say that, okay, I don't know everything. I have a lot to learn. I want to kind of tap into my own curiosity to help me learn these things. And I think I kind of have to be a bit vulnerable on the way. I cannot let my ego roam free and portray myself as the startup superstar CEO who knows everything, because we kind of just talked about those assumptions. You want to practice the level of self-awareness where you actually you understand and you hear your own thoughts while you're creating your business plan, while you're talking to your customers, while you're creating the product. And you want to distinguish between, do I actually know this? Can I prove that this stuff that I'm building now really works? Or is this just a thought of mine? Or is this based on a feeling of mine that I'm acting upon? So practicing self-awareness is key, both on the business model and actually on the team building. And no worries, we're going to get back to these themes many times today. There's a funny dualism when it comes to entrepreneurship and startups. On the other hand, startups can be, and really are, one of the most fulfilling ways to make a living. You can work on your own purpose, you can work towards your own goals, you can create the stuff that you want to create, and you don't have bosses, basically, if you're a founder. Of course, there's the board and the owners, but especially in the early stage startups, you are the boss. On the other hand, entrepreneurship can really be the scariest and most unstable way to make a living. If I take it from a sales perspective, if you, as a salesperson, go to a customer and you identify yourself with a product you sell, and the customer tells you no, then you as a startup founder in that sales situation might consider and think that I was rejected, that they didn't want my idea and my idea was bad. But that's not really the case. They said no to the product because it doesn't solve a problem for them, for example. So here comes the mental game of, first of all, are you just identifying yourself with a startup? If you are, and if the startup fails, your brain thinks that you failed. And that's not a great way to go. So as a startup founder, it's really good to keep your own identity, think of yourself as the founder, and then think of the company as a startup. And keeping those two separate is maybe one of the first steps of helping yourself work through this scary and an unstable way of making a living. So if we think about the topics today, it's not really about your next startup, but these themes are really about, the rest of your life type of thoughts. how to accelerate learning speed, how to practice self-awareness, how to build a great thriving team, and how to build a great working business model. All the skills needed you can utilize basically anywhere in your life. All right, let's move to some practicalities. The business model part, we're going to talk a lot about the lean startup, as mentioned. And from my perspective, the startup founders, when we're talking about early stage, idea stage startup founders and teams, the main task for them is to validate the hell out of almost everything that you do. We're going to get back to this many times, also when we're looking at the lean canvas. But this is definitely your most important task. And we're actually going to get back to this also in the team building part. Why do I believe that validation is the key? There's two ways, if I would categorize black and white, there's two ways to learn, two ways to build a business model. The slow way is to go the old school way of developing an idea, writing a 20 or 30-page business plan, building a team around yourself, creating the demo, doing it good old school way. Next steps are funding, market research, branding, and then ultimately launching maybe 3 years after. Now, if you're building something that hasn't been done before and you do it this way, the first learnings, the first actual learnings that you're going to get are in 3 years' time when you, for the first time, go to the potential end users and actually try to sell it to them. And been there, done that, most probably they're going to be like, yeah, that's great, but you know, I'm actually pretty happy with the way I'm doing things right now. So, you know, at least I'm not going to pay for that. I might use it sometimes for free, but maybe not even that. And that's the first time you actually learn something meaningful. And then you start to pivot. Actually, before you start to pivot, pivoting means changing your business model in one way or other. Before you even pivot, you panic because you've just invested 3 years of your time, you've invested 3 years worth of startup funding into building something that you now learn that, oh, doesn't really actually solve the problem for the end users that I thought it should. Now that's the slow way to learn. And then you have the fast way to learn, which is based on lean startup methodology. So in the beginning, in the idea stage, what you want to do is you want to identify and start immediately testing the riskiest assumptions in your idea. Easiest way to do it, for example, is you just find one person with a big enough problem that they're already looking for solutions, they've tried other solutions already, they are aware of the good and bad things of the solutions out there, and they're still looking for something better because they're unhappy with the current way of doing things. Now, that's your place to be. You want to talk to that person, you want to understand why the hell is this all happening? Why is he not finding this solution for himself? And if you drill down enough, you'll really understand that, okay, there either is or there isn't a better way to solve this thing, and you can or cannot build it. If you can build it, your next step basically is, how many of these people are out there? In a customer segment of 100 people, is this the only dude with this problem, or are there 20 more? And then you start understanding if you can actually build this into a business. If it's worth to build a team around it, if it's worth to get some funding around it, and so on. And we come back to the original theme. The slow way is just a super, super safe way for us. Biologically, nervous system-wise, brain-wise, feelings-wise, hey, piece of cake. I don't have to risk much. Well, of course, I have to get funding from the funders and so on, but the most scary part about getting rejected is from the end users. And that we do just in 3 years' time. We just postpone it all the time. We brand it nicely. We wrap the product in nice wrappings, and we make the features super beautiful. We hone everything that it works, and we're sure it delivers the value we think it should. And then we have the courage to put it out. It's all fine and dandy But most probably, if you're building something new, you've built so many assumptions into the product by that stage that ultimately you will fail. You haven't been able to solve a big enough problem for the end users that they would change their behavior. So the fast way, as mentioned, is scary. And that's one of the pains of the startup founder. If you are not, or if you don't have the courage, if you don't have the vulnerability to really face your own fears about getting rejected, it's really going to be a problem for you in the long run, already in the short run, to be honest. So comparing lean and this traditional, what I'm talking about is that in the traditional way, you build a solution and then you try to sell it. So you go out there and looking for a problem you can solve with this thing that you just built. And in the lean way, you first want to identify the problem, make sure it's big enough and people are really willing to change their behavior, and then think about if there's enough people like that in a certain customer segment that it makes a business. And then you build it. And then it comes the question of your own startup. Like, parts of your startup could be best built in this traditional way. You just copy paste a very successful competitor's certain feature set, or how they've executed their online marketing or their social media strategy. You might copy paste that because you've seen that, God damn, that works. I can do the same thing. But then, for example, if you change something in the product, if you build a different feature set, or if you focus on another customer group compared to the competitors, that's when you want to try the lean way. That's when you want to try understanding how the hell should I do with it that it actually will work. Okay. Early adopters is Hannu. Is there any questions, by the way? Okay. Feel free. Please ask questions here in the audience or online, because it'll be much more fun that way, to be honest. Oh, typing is happening. Typing is very good. No rush in the typing session. When you've finished typing, please ask the question. I'll continue with the early adopters for that time. I'm going to be talking about early adopters quite a lot. These magical creatures are people who are distinguished by a certain set of features that you have to know as a startup founder. We talk about the early market and we talk about the mainstream market. There's different terms when we talk about this curve, but I feel like this is a pretty good way to put it. In the early market, we have the techies, the tech enthusiasts, and we have the early adopters. Techies are people who get excited about anything new. They are just happy to test all good new gimmicks and things and get the experience, get the rush out of it. Early adopters are a quite significantly bigger group. They are the people who are aware that they have a problem. I am missing one slide here, unfortunately. But the early adopters, first of all, are aware that they have a problem. They know that I need to figure out this stuff better. They are already looking for those problems. Their own behavior, if you ask them, they will tell, for example, when was the last time that you tried to solve this problem that you have? They might start a 10-minute rant about, well, yeah, every month, actually, about once a month, I Google around. I try to see if there's a new solution related to this. I've been super unhappy for the past 6 months. Nothing new has come out. I actually called 8 of my friends to ask how they do this, and they didn't have a better solution either. And already by that time, if you hear this kind of enthusiasm about that person, and their search for a better way to do it, you can label that person as a very high potential early adopter. A person who's really wanting to adopt new stuff, and they might not even care if that doesn't work perfectly, but they just want to solve the problem. They're ready to try things. So if that's the case, you really want to kind of go deeper in here, and you want to ask that person that, okay, tell me about the options you've tried. And they, again, the floodgates open. If they are an early adopter, they start ranting about this X service that they tried and it sucked like this, or this Z service that they tried and this was good, but that didn't really work at all for me, so I couldn't use that. And that's when you start mapping out, okay, what is this person actually trying to get done? That's basically you setting up your sales pitch for the later days. And if you identify this person as somebody who's really, really enthusiastic about finding a solution, you can even pitch your own stuff right there. Say that, well, actually, I've been also struggling with this problem. I've tried the same options as you. I found that to be pain in the ass and that to work well, but it didn't do this for me. So now I'm thinking that I'm going to build this. If I'm going to build it, I think the first demo will be ready in 3 months. Would you want to be in my first community of people who try it out? If they say yes, you invite them to an online workshop in 3 months. You send the calendar invite for them, and that's your first potential test user. So that's how you figure it out. Now, the next step you want to do, for example, is once he has confirmed online invitation to come to this workshop, you ask that person that, do you know anybody else with this problem? And if they say that, well, yeah, in my football club, we've been discussing this with at least 5 people, and what you want to say that, can you extend the invitation to them, or can you give them can you give me their phone numbers or emails, and you get those contacts and you contact those people, and that's how you move on. So you start building this pool of early adopters in the beginning. Why am I ranting about these early adopters is that usually the case is that they're not easy to find. When you have an idea, you start looking for those early adopters. You start understanding that, oh, god damn, that people like, they're aware of this problem, but they have never actually tried to solve it. And that's where you start understanding some levels of these early adopters. We as human beings, we like complaining about shit all the time. Apologies for my French, but that's us. We complain a lot about different stuff. Oh, is there a question? Yes.
There is a question from Juha Junes. How do you find these early adopters? Any good examples?
An excellent question. Thank you, Juha. How do you find them? My best strategy so far is that you go either offline or online into the biggest congregation of potential early adopters. So let's say that you are targeting football fans. I would head to the local Oulu or Tampere or Turku football club match. And I would, for example, interview people while they're sitting next to me, or while they're having a beer on the break, or wherever. Or I would go to online forums of those teams, and I would start asking questions. I wouldn't try to pitch my thing when I registered the online forum yesterday. If I start selling something, I'll be thrown out. So what I would do is I would start asking those people that, hey, I just joined you guys. Great to be an Oulu football fan. I've been struggling with finding a solution to this football-related or football fan-related thing. I can't find a good mobile app for this Oulu team, for example. And has anybody else, faced this issue ever before? And have you found any good solutions? And if that starts a conversation of, oh, yeah, I hate this thing too. I hate using the web for these kind of things. I wish there was an app. And if there's 20 people saying the same thing, maybe you're onto something. Maybe you're not alone with this problem and there's other people with this problem. So whatever way you can get into a situation where you will be surrounded by potential early adopters, that's where you want to head. And then you start experimenting like this. It's either an online forum, it's an event, it's a workshop that you put together yourself and start posting about it into online forums where there's potential people and so on. One very efficient way nowadays is actually to establish a community of your own if there's nothing existing at the moment. And there's places like Fandom, or you can even start a Reddit thread. Just start a conversation and see if other people are finding their way to this community. Juha, please type in the chat if I answered your question or not. Okay. So, why do I rant about these early adopters? I started talking also about why it's sometimes difficult to find them. The problem is for startup founders that if you don't find these early adopters, if you don't find people who are already looking for these solutions, who are already aware that they have a problem that you want to solve, if you can't find any, that means that you would have to educate these people that, hey, there's this big problem and I'm going to solve it, and you have that problem too, and look at how big the problem is and look at how beautifully I can create a solution to it. But unfortunately, that's quite expensive. And unless you are a billionaire or in any way have a Toyota or Coca-Cola type of marketing budget, if you don't have that one and you have, let's say, 100 euros per month marketing budget, educating these people is not most probably going to be an option. It's going to take you too long time and too much resources to educate a big enough crowd of people about a problem with football club apps or the lack thereof. Yes, question.
Yes. Juha said thank you for great example, but there's also an additional question from Jari Joutsenvaara. This is a long one, so
Okay, keep it coming.
A question related to an existing case. How to adopt lean philosophy when developing a technical solution to an identified problem, but you're bringing the solution from totally outside the industry and you're the first in the world to bring it out?
Yeah, good luck with that. Was it Kari?
It was Jari.
Jari. Yeah. You just listed a set of problems or features in a way that are exceedingly difficult, completely outside of the industry, something new. If you don't have an existing network in the industry, all these are quite large barriers for you to overcome. But I would start first. I would, based on the description, I imagine this is a B2B case. So in the B2B world, the first thing you have to do is basically build your network. You have to have a network of trust so that people in this so-called B2B world can actually open up and share and tell you about their problems with their current existing ways of doing things. If you don't have this trust, then there's not ever going to be a chief product officer or a CEO who will open up about their darkest business secrets about how a certain part of their business sucks because they just don't have a better solution. So to get to those discussions, you have to build a network, you have to build trust inside this industry so that you can actually get in and understand, are you solving a big enough problem for a relevant group of people that it could become a business? How to do it in the lean way? Well, without trust building, there's no matter what you do, you're not going to get into the details well enough. So that's the first one. If you have trust, then it's okay to start experimenting with these people that you have gotten the trust with. The simplest way is, of course, to do interviews. With interviews, there's two things that you have to keep in mind. when you interview a person, you never talk about the future. You only talk about the current behavior, the now moment, this current moment, or the past behavior of that person. I've personally effed up a startup big time by showing, when I went to see my potential users in the B2B world, I showed them my product and I asked them, hey, isn't it a great product? Would you use it? And if yes, how much would you pay for it? The way I did it got me so crappy data that I ended up building something completely irrelevant to the people. They didn't start using it. The startup failed. The answers I got to the questions of, would you use it? Oh yeah, this is a great product. I would definitely use this. This would solve many of my problems. And how much would you pay for it? I was told that, well, I could pay, 90 euros per month. Somebody said 60, somebody said 150, and I was like, oh, hey, this could actually become something. I built the product. I showed it to them that this is now the ready product. We agreed that you would start using it. You would pay this much, right? Yeah. And then when it was actually the time that they should start using the product, I started getting messages that, oh, yeah, I'm pretty happy with the existing things I have, and learning this new system is kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm just going to continue with email and the regular stuff. And I was pretty flabbergasted. I was like, what the hell happened? You 7 months, 6 months ago told me that you would use this product and pay this much. And it took me 4 years to understand what actually happened. What happened was those people, when I asked them, would you use this? They had no way in the world to actually know if they would use it. They had never used the product before. They just saw a demo. And I can know if I'm going to buy a new iPhone if somebody asks me. I have a fairer phone, by the way, but if I would buy a new iPhone in 6 months' time, if somebody asks me that, I'm like, maybe, yeah, I might, or I might not. But because I'm asked the question, my brain tells me that that person expects an answer, and I try to answer the question as best as my capabilities do. Which this structure just creates bullshit data for the person. A better way to do this, for example, if I was talking to my, if I would have been a smart person back in the day, if I would have known these things, I wouldn't ask them, would you use this and how much would you pay? I would have asked them, when was the last time that you tried to look for something better to replace these emails and phone calls you seem to hate and you seem to complain about? And I was so frustrated with the failure of this startup that I actually went back to these people, back to the customers that I tried to sell my thing to, and asked this question, that when was the last time that you tried to look for a solution to that thing that I tried to solve for you? And most of them said that, well, I've never even, no. Have you Googled? No, I haven't Googled. I haven't even tried to look for, I haven't asked anybody how do they do this? Do they have a better way to do than me? So I should have allowed those people to reflect on their own past behavior, and based on that behavior, I would have understood if they are early adopters for my solution or not. I don't know if I answered the question, Jari,
Yes,
at all.
Jari has commented that actually you pointed it out, need to educate the client user so that they could convince the POs.
Oh yeah, yes. A second B2B adventure that we can have right now is B2C. In the B2C world, if you're establishing a startup with a B2C customer base, the same person is the decision maker, the budget holder, and the end user. That same person does all the decisions for their iPhone, for example. But in the B2B world, different people have these roles. So marketing manager can be the decision maker. The marketing assistant can be the end user. And then the budget holder can be the CEO. So what you have to map out and figure out is, how do these people in their own roles inside the company, how do they measure their success? So you have to understand what the CEO considers to be the most important metrics. What about the marketing manager and what about the marketing assistant? And you have to be able to, on some level, solve a problem big enough for each of these roles and the people in those roles, so that they say that, okay, I want to make this decision, it's good for me. I want to put in this money, it's good for me. And I want to use this, it's good for me. So it takes a boatload of more effort to validate all this when you were talking about the B2B world compared to the B2C. And here the key is really the success metrics, because that drives people. The CEO is most probably driven by revenue and profit, if we take it black and white. The marketing manager, their behavior and their budgets are usually driven by how can I get most sales, most revenue with a smallest budget. Or if they're very human, as we usually are, they want more budgets, so they actually want to splurge their budget but still get good results, because otherwise their budget will be cut. So here we enter this fascinating world of human behavior, because we're not logical. We definitely are not logical beings. Even if we are the CEO of BMW, we're driven by weird things inside the company, how the company measures us. And that's how usually we behave at work. That's something you need to understand when building for the B2B world. Okay, I hopefully replied to that question. So if there's no early adopters, you have to educate people. That's a problem. It's going to take time. It's going to take money. And those are the people, the pragmatists, and maybe some of them are the conservatives of this wave. And changing those people's behavior is almost impossible, usually, with your limited startup budget. That's why you have to find early adopters to get into the market, most times. I'm going to give an example from the B2C world. I talk a lot about B2B. So B2C now, this is a Finnish company called Yogaya. They were established, if I remember right, 2013. This is about 50% fiction and 50% fact. Yogaya did a lot of experimentation in the beginning to see if anybody would give a rat's ass if they built the first interactive online yoga studio in the world. And do enough people give a rat's ass that it could become a business. I'm going to flesh it up a little bit to make this kind of a perfect world case for you. Here's a couple of experiments that you can do and what they did. So they came up with the idea, and they thought that, yeah, there's like existing alternatives like YouTube or going to the yoga class or doing it yoga alone at home. So would somebody actually pay? Would somebody join this kind of interactive online yoga class if we would establish something like that? And they thought that, well, there's two ways of doing it. We know some investors, maybe we'll look for some money, maybe we'll build the platform and then we'll see. Or is there a cheaper and easier way and faster way to do this? Well, yeah, Skype exists. There's people in Facebook groups, yoga groups. So maybe, yeah, what we'll do is we'll just tell people that we're going to give a free interactive Shanti yoga class 9 p.m. LA time on the 18th of December. We'll post that with a Skype link on these Facebook groups that are filled with yoga doers. And let's see if somebody comes to the class. That's what they did. And they found out that 50 people joined the first class. And they were like, holy hell, like, who are these people and why did they come? And that was exactly their next experiment. They did a similar class, free for everybody, and they asked people to stay after the class to answer some of the questions. The first one being, why did you come to this course? And they started hearing all sorts of stories about, I'm a single mom with 2 kids, I live in LA, I love yoga, but going to the yoga class actually takes me 2 hours in the traffic. I have kids to take care of, I have to take them to school, I have my work, I just don't have the time to go every week So I've tried YouTube, but I feel really uncertain. I don't know if I'm doing things right. I have no feedback. I'm a bit scared and I feel anxious because I should be relaxing, but I don't know if I do my yoga right. So that's why this interactiveness kind of got me interested, and that's why I'm here. And this gave them the first idea of a persona canvas that can be used as part of how you validate things. This person's name was Sarah. They figured out who that person was, the facts, where does she live, what's her age, she's got 2 kids, low middle income. The behavior that she's doing right now is that it's difficult to get to the physical class, YouTube doesn't work for her, and doing yoga by herself doesn't feel just comfortable. She wants to have something more, and she's a bit unsure about if she's doing things right. The pain that she has for a single mom with 2 kids that goes to work, definitely there's no time to drive around LA to get to the class. The YouTube was the uncertainty part. Without guidance, felt uncertain. And in general, it's difficult for Sarah to unwind in the evenings to get to sleep after the hectic days of running the household with 2 kids, a day job, and so on. And the goals for her were clear. She wanted to unwind, relax, take care of her body, build a routine slowly through this yoga, and to do it actually right. So, if you think it from a business building perspective, how do you then continue if you face an early adopter like this? What they did is that they started focusing their marketing to these sort of people that they recognized. They started focusing on Sarah's online, and they did actually classes for single mothers for the evening time. If you would just want to relax, join us and other single moms in this group and we'll do interactive yoga together. And they ran experiments like this with different customer segments, with different early adopters. And they started understanding that which user group and which marketing messages work. The next step for them was to add a payment wall. They added a payment wall for each user group, and they started measuring how many people will actually pay for the next class. How they did that was that they sent everybody an email that, hey, if you want to join the next yoga class next week's Thursday, 9 p.m. again, same Shanti Yoga, same teacher, wire €5 to us through PayPal, and we'll send you the link to join the class. And then they started understanding that who's actually ready to pay. And again, through their metrics, they understood that this group of people, the marketing message works very, very well. They're happy to pay. They continued this paywall experiment for some time to understand the retention. So how many people keep it up and not quit after 5 times, but still continue. And they focused on these best performing groups. And it was decently easy at that point to actually fundraise. They were able to tell their investors, what's the problem we're solving? Who are the customer segments and the early adopters inside those customer segments? What's the marketing message that works for them? Which channels do we use to reach them? How much does it cost to get that amount of users? And how much so far have we seen them pay? And they could count already the unit metrics like what's the customer acquisition cost versus the potential lifetime value of the customer. So in 3 months, they were able to, with this rapid experimentation, really get metrics and understand and validate who should we build this to, what marketing message to use, where do we reach these people from, and so on. So if we go just a bit back, here's a tool for you to help you build your self-awareness, a bit of business awareness about what in your plan is an assumption and what's a fact. And if we take the case of Yogaya as an example, some of the things that they understood while doing it, and also in the beginning already, some of the things that were really kind of obvious. There's a lot of yoga people around there. There's a boatload of yoga schools. It's a growing trend. And people are doing yoga online already through YouTube. So it's a thing. We're not just, inventing everything out of thin air. They were able to do a lot of research to understand some of the key factors. They understood how much yoga doers are estimated to be in each country, or also in each city. There were statistics they could kind of look for and go through to understand that where should we focus? And that's why they tried LA to begin with. A huge trend, bad traffic, a lot of people wanting to do this, and so on. But then some things that they had in their thoughts ended up automatically in the critical assumptions box. One of them was like, is this interactivity going to add enough value that people will change from YouTube or going to the yoga classes to going to Yogaya classes interactively? We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be single moms or busy businessmen and their business lunch breaks or students. We really don't know. And what about the price point? Hard to say. And no research to look for. Nobody knew this. So, for example, using this kind of tool, you can help yourself be more aware about what I actually know and what I don't know. That's the first step. The second step is to really identify the things falling into the critical assumptions box, thinking what's the riskiest one? What if that doesn't work? Well, it might not. If with the pricing will be 3 euros per month or 5 euros per month, that's not such a huge difference. But if the main customer group that we're going after, if they don't care, then that's a big problem. Maybe that's where we should actually start from. And your thing with the lean startup methodology is to pick one, the biggest risk in the assumptions box, create experiments around it, create metrics around it, so that ultimately it will fall down into the non-key factors box. You've gathered enough data, enough metrics, enough evidence to prove yourself right or wrong. And while doing it, you'll learn a boatload of things. You will most probably learn that the assumption was, wrong, but there's this fact that I hadn't understood before, and that actually opens up a really interesting opportunity for us. We should validate that. And that's how the learning goes. Oh. Forwards, not backwards. I think we're going to have a chat about how this works on the lean canvas and what it is, and then we'll have a break. Lean canvas is the next step in the process that you can start using. It's 9 boxes. Basically, this is your business plan. You could write 30 pages of things, or you could start inputting things on this canvas. It's 9 boxes, as mentioned. The idea is that it's alive. It's never a static thing, and you always update it as you validate things. If we take the Yogaya case and see how the canvas works for us, the early adopters box that we have will have the single mother early adopter group. We could have another canvas, and it's advisable to have another canvas for another early adopter or customer group, so we don't mix them. We're talking about those mothers, those Sarahs. We identified their problem in the customer persona canvas. We move them here once we validated this customer persona that they exist, and there's multiple ones of them. We understand the existing alternatives that they have, the YouTubes, and so on. And here we want to kind of start going to box number 3, which is the value proposition. So if we understand who have a problem, what the problem is, what their existing alternatives, then we can start thinking that what's the right kind of value proposition for these people? How do we distinguish ourselves from the competition in a way that it attracts these people to try my thing? And it could be as simple as do yoga from home. After kids go to sleep, this is your precious self-time, and we'll have personal instructions for you, and you'll get the support of a like-minded community. When we have this, when we have these 3 boxes figured out, then we basically know what the hell should we build these people. If we know who has the problem, what the problem is, what's their existing alternatives, we understand the competition, we understand why we're better, and we understand the value proposition, then we really know that, okay, we'll build them streamed online yoga classes. It's timed after children go to sleep. It'll be daily, and there'll be a monthly/yearly membership to pay. So that's the solution. The magic about these 4 boxes, and we're going to get back to this a bit later too, but everything else in your business model builds on top of these 4 boxes. If you got these right, you are off to an excellent start. But if one or more boxes is not accurate, that you haven't validated the shit out of it, then you're probably going to end up building something that's not going to work. If, let's say, the problem that you're solving is not big enough for them to change their behavior, well, it doesn't matter what you try. If they don't give a rat's ass about it, you can't force them to use it. If the customer segment or the early adopter group is wrong, same there. If the value proposition is wrong, nobody gives a rat's ass. But if these 4 are right, voila, you're off to a super start. So that's the idea of this whole lean thing. You're aware of those assumptions. You also have the facts in your lean canvas separated, like offspring things, keep them separated. So the facts and assumptions are separated in your lean canvas. You understand what to validate. You want to build those experiments to test and understand how does it work. And then you get those answers and metrics from your end users that do they actually give a rat's ass about it or not, for example. Is it going to change their behavior? Do they want to hear more? Do they want to join that workshop? Is their behavior showing that they are actually interested in this? And then you modify the assumptions on the canvas. And that is the cycle of lean startup. All right. Before we go more into the lean canvas, it's time for a break. We'll be back at 10:05, so we'll have an 8-minute break. See you then. All right. Welcome back from the break. It's time to continue. So we're going to do it the same way. We'll have about 50 minutes to 1 hour, depending a little bit, and then we'll have another 10-minute, 5-minute break, and then finish. We're going to continue a little bit with the Lean Canvas, about different ways of using that tool to build that awareness, to build that business awareness and self-awareness around your own idea. And while you're building the idea, how to use the Lean Canvas in a good way. I wish that you will ask more questions. I think it adds a good layer to the discussion, so feel definitely free to ask questions. I have a personal favorite quote from somebody I don't remember, that there's no stupid questions, there's only stupid answers, and that's my philosophy. Okay, Lean Canvas. Why is my screen not working? Just a second. I would hope that I would see things on my own screen too. Just a sec. Let's see how this works now. All right. Working again. So, you're currently in Canvas. The practice that you want to do with a Lean Canvas, that we use those 4 boxes also with, is that you really want to be aware of what do you actually know and what are your assumptions. I'm going through this again because this is one of the most difficult things for founders to do. Recognizing that a certain part of my business plan is not validated. I have no data to prove it or to back it up. Because we founders, I say we because I'm a multi-time founder, multi-time failure in that sense, also a couple of times successful. But what's been always present in the failures is that I've confused my own thoughts, my own feelings with the facts. Now, you visualize it. You want to put the assumptions with a red pen or with a red post-it, and a fact that you know that's validated and you have data to back it up or research to back it up, you use a green sticker or a green pen, for example. And it's really this granular that you have to be to keep those things separated. Once you're training to do this, once you're getting comfortable with, okay, I'm not the all-knowing CEO, I will be vulnerable, I will be okay with the fact that I don't know everything. And you use those red stickers to put those assumptions there. You've done that work. The next thing you want to do is you want to identify what's the riskiest one. That's not always easy, and you're most probably not going to get it right because it's hard to know what's the riskiest assumption. But using some plain old sense, you start figuring out that if that's not true, or if there's something wrong with that part of the plan, it will all suck. And then you know you'll start with that assumption. And again, I really want to underline this, that if you don't, first of all, identify those assumptions from the facts, and if you don't do anything about them, you will end up learning so slow that you will not be able to build a successful business model by the time you run out of resources and you end up failing. So we're going to go to a very light workshop part. We're going to work on your own business model. And I want you to do the exercise in the way that you list 3 things that you know about your business, and you list 3 things that you know that are assumptions. Later, you can gather up with your team members and see what all of you wrote. If you're working on this alone, that's fine too. You'll do it as a homework too, in a way. You'll take a new look at it. But as a team, you don't need a Lean Canvas right now. You can, for example, just list in a word that this goes to the solution box. My assumption is that the pricing will be this, or if we're talking about the value proposition, for example, I believe that based on my understanding on the problem and the customer segments, the value proposition that will work is that get the exclusive experience of a football club and the players into your mobile phone, if I'm talking about the app, for example. So 3 things that you've researched or have data from, those are the known things. Write those down, and then you have those assumptions that you're aware of that this doesn't really, this is not sure yet. So I'll give you 3 minutes to work on it, and then we'll continue. And if somebody has a question, feel free to post that, and we can take those. You have 1 minute left. All right. The interesting part about this exercise and this tool is that, especially if you have team members, let's say you have a team of 4, the variety of things that will end up in each one of your canvases most probably is going to surprise you. And that's one of the best ways to really have an open conversation about who thinks what is known and who thinks what's an assumption can be very, very different. And it will also give you a glimpse into the chaotic nature of building a startup together with 4 people who look from their 4 different angles, 4 different pasts, cultures, and professional points of view about the same thing. And this is one of the very positive effects of this tool, that you can actually share these. You can actually have an honest, open discussion that what is actually known, what do we know, what do we have, what don't we have, and where should we start from. That's something, unfortunately, too few startup teams actually go through. They don't have these discussions. And in the beginning, it's extremely, extremely important to go through this. And usually, it's a tedious job for one person to try to keep this conversation up. But I would encourage you that have somebody accountable for this. Choose one person from your team who takes the accountability of driving this discussion and going through this discussion, let's say once per month. What's happened? What's changed? What have we been able to actually validate? What have we learned? And by doing that, your team can actually work together to create something meaningful. Without that discussion, most probably you're 4 people with their own assumptions, own thoughts, of course own feelings, running around and not really working together. This is a rerun of what we talked about already. The Lean Canvas gives you a great model to think about how your business model actually builds on top of layers. You really need to understand the problem that you're solving. You really need to understand the existing alternatives that people are using. If you don't understand that, you have nothing to build a solution to. You really need to understand the early adopters and later the customer segments. Who am I doing this for? When you understand those two, what's the problem you're solving and for who, you understand how to put it into a marketing message, into a value proposition. That's the layer number 3. Again, experiments going to go through that to learn what works. And then when you understand what's the message, then you know exactly what to build them. At least the first features. What problem should I solve, for who, and why the hell are they really interested in this? What's the value proposition that makes them click, makes them want to try this? When all of this is validated, and this might take you from 1 month to 2 years. Some startups are in this loop of trying to validate these 4 boxes, and they're going on their 4th year. And they've had some success in building a mediocre revenue stream, but it's not scaling. It's not booming. There's no promise of that huge exit yet. But they've got some of the stuff working, but they're still continuing to look for because they want to make it big. So, as mentioned, if one or several of these 4 don't work, you have basically yet nothing. You don't have a working business model. And this is coming back to the why startups fail, that if you haven't validated every box of these thoroughly, your business model is going to fall flat. You're risking a lot. You're chancing a lot that I haven't validated if this value proposition works really, but we have a pressure from the investors to launch to get some revenue, so let's take the risk and launch. And you put in 5,000 euros for an online marketing campaign to begin with, and you see the first 3 weeks that you're actually struggling to find that what could work, and let's say half of your budget went down the drain learning that, okay, that didn't work either. Oh crap, that didn't work. And then maybe halfway, when you're burned half of your marketing budget, 2.5K already burned, you'll start learning that, hey, this actually works. It's super expensive that way. It's both expensive on the money side, but also on the time side. It takes a boatload of effort for your team under the pressure of, we have this 5K budget, we need to make it work, we need to get the metrics together to show the investors that we have traction, and they will invest more. Without that burden, without that pressure, without that budget running all the time, it's way easier for you to experiment. So allow yourself, create that space for yourself to experiment safely and see what actually works. The perfect timing is when you don't have a budget because you're not burning money, you're not taking huge risks, you have all the freedom in the world to experiment and try and learn fast. Okay. So, back to the beginning. Again, it's difficult because it doesn't feel safe. Validating this, going to the early adopters, speaking to them, facing potential rejection 100 times, it's not nice. Nobody wants to go through that. And that's why our body tells us that no, don't go to anybody, don't talk to anybody, don't show your product to anybody until it's really pretty. But that's the slow way to learn, of course, we know that now. All right. So again, Lean Canvas is a tool for you through practicing that self-awareness, that business awareness even of assumptions of what is known, it really helps you accelerate your learning speed. That's the whole point of the Lean Canvas. Be aware of what is going on and then act upon those to accelerate your learning speed. To ultimately be fast enough to build that business model that works before you run out of those resources. Okay. I added a bit of extra during the pause because I was hoping actually to have a lot more conversation with the audience. So please bring the questions on. Because we haven't had yet that much conversation or questions, I added this timing part. Timing is age-old question. Do we have a question?
I'm not sure if we're able to have this. We have a raised hand here from Sami Uusitalo.
Sami, please go ahead. Type if you can't speak.
Tech-wise, does it work? Yes.
We have a question incoming from Sami.
I'm gonna. Did you get that? I can do
I
like a
did
quick
not.
synthesis of what the question
Please.
was. So basically, people coming from all different cultural backgrounds and English, or they don't necessarily share a common language to begin with. So how do you make sure when you discuss this thing on the Lean Canvas that the terminology and the issues are understood by everyone in the same way?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Sami, very much for pointing that out. Well, you do and you don't. So what I mean by that is you have to start from the basics, like you said, the terminology, and make sure that everybody is on the same page. Basically, myself, I've used Wikipedia. So if there's a term that we need to share, we really need to have a common understanding of, we all go to Wikipedia, we take a look at the screen, we read it, and we have a discussion. That's one way to do it, to make sure. If we have cultural backgrounds, if we have language backgrounds that are different, it's, of course, a huge extra barrier in a way on the communication side. Language, we really can't help that. What we need to make sure that everybody's English or German or French skills are adequate enough to have those conversations. And if we feel that somebody is really lacking, that needs to be brought up. And either we find ways how to overcome that, or then it becomes too much of a strain for the team. So, and I think this is one of those difficult things that the team has to be able to discuss. It takes a lot of vulnerability, especially for the person who is facing the biggest difficulty, let's say with Swedish, if the team's language of choice is Swedish. And can that person really then work effectively as a part of the team? And also culturally, the same things kind of apply there. we need to build common understanding about those cultural issues and understand the reasons behind to really be able to discuss them, bring them up to discussion, and see how we can solve those issues. We're actually going to talk about these things a bit in the team building part. So, Sami, I hope I can actually answer your question even better then. And actually how to go through these discussions, how to bring these up, and so on. Okay, back to timing. So, this is an issue I don't always bring up because it's difficult from my perspective. My slides are not the best, to be honest, on this. There's a lot of text, but I wish that we can share the slides with you afterwards so you can go back to the topics and think about them for a bit. At least it's been difficult for me. So the question, the age-old question about startups is, how do you know your timing is right? How do you know and how can you figure out if you're at the right time and at the right place in the early stages of a startup? One of the scary parts of this is that at that time, if the timing is good, you're not alone. There's competition, there's trends, there's some talk in the professional media about something like what you are going to build. There's online forums actively discussing these issues, these problems that you're trying to solve, and there's at least budding competition. There's people who are interested in building similar type of solutions or solutions to the same genre of problems that you're working on. And this can feel daunting, but this is actually a great sign. This is the sign that you actually have to be aware of on the logical level and on the feelings level. If end users are already looking for solutions, they're not happy with the existing ones, that's of course a timing thing. You know that you are on the cusp of something, that there's a trend happening or either a mega trend kind of driving these discussions and people then ultimately looking for solutions. When you continue this timing venture, you want to understand if this is the right time and the right place for this kind of for an idea. What happens during the validation is that you start seeing patterns. What I mean by a pattern is that you find a group of early adopters who all share a very similar problem, are looking for solutions. They've tried similar type of products to get a solution for themselves, but they're not happy with them. That's a pattern. If that pattern continues in a way that when you offer your product to them, you pitch it to them and they say that, give me it. That's another pattern. So there's a group of people that, let's say, 8 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 share a similar behavior when you, for example, offer or pitch your product to them and they say, give me it, I want to try. That's a pattern. Then you start understanding that, okay, this is not just my imagination, this is actually a good time and my place, so to say, my customer segment that I'm aiming is good. Another timing related issue is that you get referred. The word of mouth is something that you cannot really create, but it happens when you are talking to a group of people that know others with a similar problem. A classic example is a football team with knee injuries. Like every footballer has a knee injury at least once or twice or I don't know how many times in their career. And if you're able to solve these knee injuries or prevent knee injuries of players with a bandage or whatnot, these football players will for sure share it with their friends because they want to be the person who discovered this new awesome thing to prevent knee injuries. And that's how word of mouth happens. So there is a group of people who are aware of the same problem and they share solutions to that. That's also when you know that timing is right. This can be measured, of course. How many of your customers come through referrals? Or how many of your first workshop that you talked about knee injuries in or that you will do, how many of those people came through referrals to that workshop? So what about how to tell then if I'm right on the timing, if this is the right time, or if I'm too early or too late? So the right time, as we mentioned, the patterns, there's significant amounts of early adopters that you can quickly reach and find. This is quite rare, but it does happen. They want to spread voluntarily information about your solution, and if the timing is super right, then after the early adopters, the pragmatists or the conservatives, the majority of people start already getting interested about your product. What if you're too early? And too early can also mean, in this case, that the problem you're solving is just too small. That the problem is not big enough for people to really change their behavior. The clear signs, of course, are that no one is actively looking for a better way to solve this issue. And that's very human of us. I mean, we have room in our lives to solve maybe one or two major things at a time. Other problems that we have just, are shoved aside until these two big ones are solved. And this is part of your validation to figure it out if the problem you're solving is big enough. And you do that by understanding the behavior of that person, the past behavior. Have they tried to look for solutions? Have they tried it? Have they asked their friends? Have they Googled? Are they happy with the current ones or not? So that's the kind of low in problem hierarchy bit. You're too early because people haven't really woken up to this issue that this is a big problem, it needs to be solved, and that's why the interest is not that great. And of course, another too early thing is that you just can't find early adopters. And you ultimately understand that, well, maybe I found a small amount of early adopters, but not a big enough group that it would make any sort of a reasonable business. What about too late? Too late for a startup means that the market is saturated in a way that it is expensive for you to obtain customers. It means that it might be even hard to find early adopters because they are pretty happy with the existing solutions. The market is full of options and everybody has kind of found their favorite and they're happy enough with them. Maybe not with everything related to the product, but happy enough that they're not currently actively searching for other options. And what this means, it's kind of fine for a startup if you're a bit too late. What you need to be aware of is how expensive is it going to be for yourself or for the company to obtain those customers and how long are they going to stay. Usually on this too late scenario, it's going to be a bit more expensive than if the timing is right. But it doesn't matter that your startup is, dead or anything. It just means that you might have to get more money from the investors. You might have to think in longer term. You might have to be aware that you need some more efficient, maybe growth hacking or similar ideas in the customer acquisition to really make this work. And for that, again, it's going to be experimentation. Am I going to be able to obtain customers from my competition in a meaningful way with a reasonable budget so that the business model will actually work? Maybe if we go a bit deeper into this rabbit hole, there's related to timing and the startup life cycle, there are a few terms that get thrown around. The other is problem solution fit and the other is product market fit. And I think these are decently educational things to know about and understand your position, where you are at, especially when you talk with investors. Problem solution fit, if you are before this stage, it means that you haven't really yet validated the severity, the size of the problem. You haven't validated if people will change their behavior when you present them with your solution. So you haven't validated is the problem big enough that you're solving. You haven't yet validated if there's enough customers really for this to become a business. You might not even know what are the exact existing alternatives that the people use to solve their problem right now. You're not really familiar with, okay, how do I identify an early adopter? How do I know who's an early adopter for my solution? And you're not aware actually what value proposition yet works. But after this magical problem solution fit, after you've understood like, okay, there is this problem, I can create this solution, it definitely seems to bring the value that those people want, they're sticking with my solution at least for some time. That's when you've basically reached problem solution fit. So you have validated a group of people, and that group of people is finding the value that they want to get from your product. You possibly understand a little bit on the pricing side that how much are they ready to pay? And you have some guesses or some metrics and data that, okay, these people are willing to pay 50 euros per month. Those are maybe already paying 60 euros per month. And you kind of understand how does your value turn into money in that exchange. And you already have identified possible customer acquisition channels. So you've reached to your early adopter groups through some existing channels. And then you have gotten the feedback that, okay, with this value proposition, through this marketing, through this channel, I can actually convert some of these people to users. Then we go to this magical other side of this equation, the so-called product market fit. Before you've reached product market fit, you will know that you haven't reached it because you're not yet profitable. It's a very simple metric. You have some encouraging retention metrics, which means that your customers are continuing to use your product, thus proving that you're actually providing the value that they're looking for constantly. They keep using it. That's called retention. So you know that the problem exists, but you're not yet really sure if your solution is the perfect one. But there's metrics already to show that that's the case. You are not exactly sure if you're targeting the right market. You have metrics and proof that there's really stuff happening. I'm getting users, but is this exactly it? I don't know. You might have other possible signs of traction, but no organic growth yet. And by organic growth, I mean that if you don't put any money into your marketing, are your user amounts growing or not? Before product market fit, you haven't really cracked that nut open yet. There's no organic growth, at least not much. So you could summarize that before reaching this product market fit stage, you haven't really proved that your go-to-market strategy works. And this is where this whole investor thing comes in. Investors are always looking for these perfect startups who have reached product market fit. And that's quite late in this early stage startup journey. After reaching product market fit, you will know you've reached product market fit when your customers are buying your product, loving it, and telling others about it. That's one of the clearest signs. That's the word of mouth part. You have defined growth strategies in place, and you're profitable, or your user amounts are growing steadily. And you're actually not targeting early adopters anymore. You're moving to the major markets already. So in other words, you have a go-to-market strategy that works. And with investors, it's good to be aware of being able to place yourself somewhere on this map. Saying that, yes, we have reached problem solution fit. These and these and these things prove it. And now our next thing is to find product market fit. And for that, we're going to need 100,000 euros or 500,000 euros to reach that stage. Then you have some vocabulary that most probably both of you understand. Any thoughts or questions about this? Right? Keep them coming if you have, because we're going to take the other rabbit hole next. So we've been talking about the business side extensively, hopefully. And now we're going to go to this other side of this equation. So our topic was, how do you build a successful business model and a thriving team at the same time? I've been prepping this team topic with these talks of human biology, how the body wants to keep ourselves safe. That's the number one priority for it. Why is it difficult to accelerate your learning speed? Why it's difficult to go to talk to your end users without a product, for example, fearing of rejection. How do you then, and what kind of tools and processes can you use for, first of all yourself, but also together with a team to help yourselves accelerate learning speed also in this team building side? That's the idea. So the purpose of this session is to take a few steps back to actually be able to look a bit ahead, accelerate your learning speed on the team building side, and really use two keywords, vulnerability and curiosity, to build self-awareness. I'm going to use those two words hopefully quite a lot. Curiosity is good because it's inbuilt. It's in every human being biologically, by evolution, it's there. We don't have to learn much. We can tap into our curiosity. We're naturally curious about some certain topics, and that's how it works. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is more of a practicable skill. By vulnerability, I mean, for example, that I can say that I feel anxious about if I'm able to actually portray these thoughts to you in a reasonable manner so that I can help you to build a better team, for example. I'm vulnerable. I'm open about my fears. I'm open about my insecurities, basically. And that's something that if you don't have vulnerability present in your early stage startup business work or teamwork, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to get things working right. If nobody can say that I'm unsure about this, or I don't know if this is going to work, or I feel like I'm not really on top of my game at the moment. If everybody is kind of portraying and playing themselves to be the super ego startup founders, it's not going to work well for the communication part. It's not going to work well for being aware of what are our assumptions and what are the facts. So your goals, hopefully, in the end will, through this session, understand the current status of yourself, your team, and on your startup on this level. Build slowly, with the tools that we're going through, build the shared understanding of how do we actually want to better ourselves? How do we want to learn about more about ourselves to build this team that builds this awesome startup? And it's really about shared understanding, because in a team, we actually create meaning amongst ourselves, and we create connections amongst ourselves, between each other. It is not just me and you, but the meaning and the business building actually happens in the interaction. And that's the part you really want to strengthen. Without vulnerability, there's not much of interaction that's valuable. So the end result, your goal could, for example, be this beautiful wording that you want to build a diverse group of self-aware and skilled people who are committed in making this startup a successful one. Skilled can be that you're skilled already, but the startup skills are actually quite quick to learn. So you don't have to be skilled right now, but to get investment, you truly have to show the investors that you're skilled and you know what you're doing. And again, if you want to learn quick, you need to accelerate the learning speed. through building the self-awareness, and then you can actually become skilled. So, when it comes to team talk in the startup world, if you want to build something actually meaningful, building it alone is not really an option. We haven't seen, at least yet, I haven't heard of any startup that has been built just purely alone and it has made it big. I haven't heard of anything like that. So, if we consider a few of the must-haves that we need in the team building part, is the self-awareness. You actually need to know yourself, at least somewhat, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to tell about your insecurities, to share your own feelings related to something, or be open about that, okay, I know I'm the CEO, but to be honest, I don't know what to do next. Can we figure this out together? If you don't do this, if you want to be just a startup CEO who wants to show themselves as somebody who knows what to do, you will most probably drive the team into a wrong direction, and that's not useful for anybody. One other must-have is something called the purpose. For some teams, it can be a goal also. But by a purpose, I mean that when you build a startup team, it's usually built around a purpose. The founder who gets the idea talks about the idea in forums, in events, and talks, for example, that I'm a super enthusiastic football fan myself, and to be honest, I found the mobile app experience of football clubs appalling, and I think there's actually a lot of money to be made, and I feel like it's a community that I want to be a part of. So if you're interested in these kind of things, just come talk to me and let's have a chat. And the people who come will most probably, at least on some level, share that purpose. That, hey, I'm actually enthusiastic about that same thing, let's talk. That's how you begin building a team around a purpose. The next thing you need is psychological safety. And this is something that basically is the building block of vulnerability. If people don't feel safe around you, around other team members, nobody will talk about, I'm actually afraid that I'm going to F this up, or that's not going to work, or nobody is really willing to talk about their assumptions, because if you don't feel safe, you don't want to do that. So, how do we start building this? The building part is, of course, a juxtaposition in a way. How do you build something innate like this, or something non-physical? But you start, of course, with yourself and your self-awareness. If you are the founder yourself, you have to be aware of the purpose. You have to be aware, why am I doing this? What drives me? And you want to communicate that to identify the people who share that same purpose. Those people will become either your customers, your team members, or your investors. You really need to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to take a look at an exercise that helps you figure these out. Also the skills. You want to understand your motivation, your personality a bit. So communicating that purpose to bring the people together, number one. Number two thing to build this, you need to build the awareness, both on the business and on the personal level of what's going to happen, what are we doing. And fostering that psychological safety is the key issue. I think that we will have a break before going to a couple of exercises. So we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll look at together how and through what kind of tools can we actually create the processes that we need to get these must-haves into our team to be able to build the culture that we actually want to be able to reach that goal with our startup. So 10 minutes, we'll be back exactly 11 o'clock, so 9-minute break. See you soon. All right, welcome back from the break. I hope you had a good one. I enjoyed some green tea and some water and some discussion, so we're happy here. Okay, it's time to get to the beef of things or the soya of things. Even if you're a vegetarian, I think that's more appropriate. There's two exercises, the past and the now, that we're going to go through. The past will, of course, look at the past and the past behavior, and the now will look at the current behavior and just a little bit towards the future. The idea of the past is that you have a pen and paper, or you can do it in a Word document, you can do it in an Excel, but the idea is that you have a timeline. And you're going to reflect on your past behavior. Let's say you've been startup entrepreneur, so to say. You haven't founded the company, but you've been working around this idea for, let's say, 6 months. The idea is to take that moment and put it in the beginning of the timeline that you got the idea in. In here, it was January 2020. The year could be 2021 to be more accurate. But in January, let's say, I got the idea for a startup. I continue filling the timeline, ending in this now, current moment, and I continue adding the meaningful, maybe scary, maybe anxious, maybe happy, maybe joyful events that happened during that time. All the meaningful stuff that I remember. Let's say a person joined the team, something happened. Let's say I got brutally rejected by a potential investor telling us, the investor told us that that's childish, you'll never make that work, that's stupid. No investors will tell you that, but it happened to me, made me really feel anxious, made me really doubt myself and the whole idea. But then something awesome happened. I got back on track. Then we made a pivot. Things changed completely with the idea. And then a dude called Mark, like a super product person, joined the team. And now we're here. We have the team together. We've pivoted 2 times. It's been quite up and downs. And what I can recognize is that I was really afraid of the rejection, and that made me sulk for a month, and it took me a lot of time to recover. But when I really got to talk with the end users and I heard from them how great this is and they wanted to try it, it made me again feel super excited. It got the others also fired up. And this could be, for example, my story of this past. What the idea with this is that when you create this for yourself and when you share this with the team members of yours, you want to kind of discuss openly what made you feel bad, what made you feel good, what was meaningful, what gave you energy, what took the energy away. And it will actually help you understand so much more about why the hell am I doing this, and it will help the other team members understand who is this person I'm working with, why is that person working on this, and so on. The meaningfulness of it is actually the key. So we're trying to get, with this exercise, to those issues that describe the why are you doing this? What makes you tick? What gets you excited? What work was really difficult for you? What did you think sucked so bad that you never want to do it again? And it will help us reflect a little bit when we go to the next exercise. But it will also help you understand what's worked for me, what's worked for the team, and how much work have we done during that time and how much have we accomplished. It will help you also reflect towards the future that how much can we expect to get done with similar resources? Or do we need double more, or could we do with less? And that will actually help you in planning your team building. And it will also, when you share these things, it will help you understand your team members. Why are they doing this? Do we share this purpose, or what's the actual purpose we share? And that will help you really motivate each other to understand that, God damn, we're actually building this for this kind of a purpose. That's so awesome that we share that. And that will become the kind of energy box of your team that you can all feed into by sharing it, by looking at it, by sharing the ideas related to it, and so on. So I'll give you 3 minutes to create your own timeline from the moment that you got the idea up to this moment. And what's happened, mark the month and the date, and then just a short description about what was great, what was awful, what was meaningful. And 3 minutes starts now. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. Happy to have a discussion. And you have about a minute left. All right. Feel free, of course, to continue on your own time. 3 minutes is a bit too short for this to be done perfectly or well enough, let's say. And the idea is that after all your team members have completed the exercise, you get together online or offline, the way you want, and you really share the stories. And this exercise, the whole point of it is to actually practice vulnerability. Practice being open about your own, what you might consider shortcomings, or things that you feel that I didn't do the best job, or a certain fear or a feeling of anxiousness really prohibited me from doing a great job. And by doing that, you can really share that with your team members, that maybe I'm not the best in the customer facing role of this company, for example, because I've felt so anxious in my past with tasks related to it that I happily give that role to somebody else in the team, for example. So the idea is to shed light to who you are in a way when all of you guys do it, and you build the shared understanding of what you've been good at and what you've enjoyed and what you've been afraid in the past, to build a team that actually functions together, that supports each other, and that also can understand if you're lacking somewhere. If nobody, like, let's say 3 team members, everybody hates the customer-facing role, then it's pretty easy to say that maybe we need somebody for that role, because we need customers at some point. Okay. We're going to go A bit deeper into this rabbit hole, this was kind of a warm-up. So the next exercise, called the now, is more about the skills, strengths, weaknesses, and tying it to the business. For example, the validation work of your startup. So the idea in this the now exercise is that you do this individually first, same like with the past, and then with your team together later. What you want to do is you want to figure out what are the approximate tasks for the next 1 month, for example. If you have a boatload of tasks, this time can be, for example, 2 weeks. The idea is that this repeats itself, this exercise, every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. I have now 4 weeks, 1 month as the timeline. The idea is that I'm going to do a self-assessment. I'm going to rate myself. How do I think I do, let's say with face-to-face interviews or cold calling people or branding the company or the product. And I rate myself in 3 areas. How good am I in it, meaning the skill? How much I love doing it, meaning the love? And then how much am I looking forward to developing myself in this area, the development part? You can use Excel, you can use Google Sheets. Paper doesn't work that well because you have to edit things around a little bit, but if you have nothing else at the moment, for the first version, paper is fine. In this exercise, really, it's about what you're good at, what skills you might be lacking, and what you like doing and where you want to develop. The idea of this is for yourself, looking from a self perspective, is to figure out what kind of a role do I want to build myself in this startup, where I enjoy working, where I'm efficient, and what are the things I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. I want others to take care of those things. When you do this, you personally yourself, of course, understand that I can't do everything. I need help in certain areas. And at a later stage, with the team, you understand that we might be lacking something. We might need to recruit or outsource always these things because otherwise things won't get forwards. So the idea is to take that 1 month, for example, and you create a list of those tasks. In this case, the startup is at a validation stage, and they have tasks like face-to-face user interviews, online discussions, cold calling, social media direct messages, and so on. They also have some things from competitor analysis perspective, something from the product, like mapping out MVP requirements as the validation goes on. They have some business plan related things, and they decided to use the lean canvas, and they want to create the first lean canvas version in the 4 weeks time. So you group the tasks under these areas of work. The next thing is you add your name into the equation, and what you start doing, like Phoebe here, is that you start assessing yourself. Phoebe here put the skill number 2. So Phoebe thinks she's pretty good at it. Not the best, but she knows her business. She gave herself a 1 in love, the middle one here. And then in the development also she gave herself the number 1. It's 1 to 3. So 1 is, I don't like it. I don't want to develop in it. Number 2 is, yeah, it's actually interesting. I'm looking forward to learning more. And number 3 in the development would be, God damn, this is my shit. I want to do this. This is where I want to develop. And you mark down in the Excel like this on your own column, how do things look from your own perspective? Where are you good at, what you love, and where you want to develop. And I want to give you a few minutes to run through this exercise, and then we're going to take a look at how does this work when we bring the other team members in and we start having the discussion of who should take responsibility and accountability for what area and why. Okay, 10 minutes might be too much for us, so I would expect that you can guys do it in 6. So we'll start again at 11:20 with this exercise done. And feel free to ask any questions through the chat. And as a comment, while I remember, I want to say that all these exercises, all these team exercises can be found in the Business Oulu house space platform. So you can reach out to the Business Oulu people if you don't know how to get access to that one. And you can find all these exercises and thoughts there too. You have about 2 minutes left. All right, let's continue. The idea is not that you can do it perfectly, but you can continue this on your own time. The way we did it now, that each individual comes up with these tasks themselves and starts to rate themselves, the conversation already gets interesting when you compare what kind of tasks everybody thought that we should do next month. The marketing person usually thinks about marketing related issues, the product person, product issues, and so on. And that can actually open up the discussion that what's actually important, what should be focused in the first month right now. That's a good conversation to begin with. The second one is that when you start pulling these data together about yourselves, the team of Phoebe, Tim and Laura, trying to figure out that who maybe wants to do what. When you put these into numbers like this, it opens up the possibility for everybody again to share their stories. Why do they like cold calling, or why do they hate cold calling? Hating cold calling is of course maybe 99% of the case, but you might have an interesting person who loves cold calling. I would love to have that kind of a person in my team, because my cold calling is number one on all levels. Okay, maybe I'm pretty good at it because I've been doing it, but I hate it. If I would be responsible for the reach out of customers through cold calling, and my accountability would be to be really responsible for that experiment, it would take me 40 days, even if the work could be done in one day. But I would be procrastinating like an animal because I just hate it. I would always do something more fun and push that task further. So the idea is that when everybody shares the stories, why do they like something? Why do they think they're good at it? And why do they want to develop in it? You really start understanding that what kind of a team we actually have for this next 4 weeks. And let's say here on the face-to-face interviews, it's quite clear that Phoebe should be the person accountable for doing it. Tim is like me, doesn't give a rat's ass about cold calling, or sorry, face-to-face interviews, the first line. And Laura has done it, but doesn't really love it at all, hates it to be honest, and doesn't want to develop it because she hates it. So Phoebe can be the accountable person for that task, and Laura can be as a reserve, as a helper, so to say. Tim, we can just forget about it on that side. And this gives us a natural way to A, get to know each other on a meaningful level that ties into the business stuff that we need to get done. It helps us figuring out where we're actually good at as a team. It helps us understand what skills are we missing. It helps us understand most probably why some stuff is never going to happen because everybody is just not going to do it. And we really understand what we like doing, where we want to develop in. So strengths, clarity of roles, and clarity of accountability can be reached through a discussion like this. The face-to-face interviews is another example. The MVP building, for example. Tim here has scored himself like really good at it, really loves it, and really still wants to develop in it. Naturally, that person should be accountable for that. Take the doer role. I've marked the yellow one, Laura, as something I would call that she can really help maybe. She's been pretty good at it, she loves doing it, but has been doing it for so long that doesn't really want to develop in that. Her interests are elsewhere. But she can support. If Tim needs a bit of help, 2 hours per week to map out something, Laura could be there to help. Phoebe, I've marked down as somebody who could be a follower to this task. A follower is somebody who's not really good at it yet, but wants to learn and actually likes it. And in this sense, we kind of open up different kind of roles for ourselves to do things. We open up the role of a doer, we open up the role of a helper, and the role of a follower. So the doer is the person who hopefully loves doing it, wants to develop, and is really good at it. The helper is kind of the expert that can help the person with certain parts of the task. And the follower is somebody who's really interested in it, but doesn't really feel like yet comfortable in taking accountability. So here comes the biggest difference between corporations and startups. In a startup, in an early idea stage startup, I think it's futile to try to cram these early stage startup and lean startup tasks into the traditional roles of CTOs or CEOs or marketing managers because they just don't fit. Corporations are running existing business models with proven metrics, and that's how they do things. Startups have none of that. They don't have an existing business model, they don't have proven metrics, they have to figure them out. So the roles of corporations don't fit into startups. A better way could be, for example, this called swarms. So what is a swarm is, for example, in the face-to-face interviews part, the doer role, the accountability is on Phoebe's table, and Laura has told her that, hey, I can help. If you need any support, I can help with some task or setting up something. In face-to-face interviews, she could, for example, look for channels how to reach these people, if she's been doing that previously. Now, in this way, we are actually sharing areas of accountability within the team based on actual interest, love, and willingness to develop in that area. I would consider that that's behind motivation, that's behind everything meaningful that you really want to work in a startup. So, if we think about accelerating your learning speed on the team level, we come back to these two exercises, and what they want to accomplish, or through them, what you can accomplish, is the first tests of vulnerability, so that people are actually open to share what they like doing, what they don't like doing, what they think they're good at, what they think they're bad at. And through that discussion, create trust within the team up to a level where anybody can be vulnerable and say that, crap, yeah, I took the task, but I noticed that I procrastinated for the first 3 weeks, and then I tried to, make it happen in the last week, but I really couldn't. So I don't think I'm the best person to take up that task next time or continue that. And that's how you can actually figure out roles that people enjoy, they have fun at, they want to develop in, and they can really strive in. And the only way to do that is to be open about these things. Behind there is also curiosity. So you really have to be curious about your own self, and you have to be curious about your teammates. Without that curiosity, you can't really learn anything from the other person. You really want to listen. You want to listen to yourself telling those stories, and you want to listen to the other people telling those stories. And through that, you create the meaningfulness of actually building something together as a team. And I believe this is key. When we talked about in the beginning about fear of failure maybe, or the fear of rejection and all that, those are difficult things, but through tools and processes like these, you have both the logical part, the lean startup, and the feelings part through these team building tools to actually create processes and ultimately the culture that you want your startup to have, so that you can ultimately get to that goal of whatever, 1 million users, or creating the best ever football app to the fans, or whatever your purpose actually is. And all starts basically with the self-awareness part. So you have to identify your own feelings, your own thoughts. You have to get to know yourself better to be able to communicate to the other team members that where I'm good at, where I'm bad at. And that's not really easy. And that doesn't happen in a day. But if you don't start it in the early stages, the idea stages of this team building and of your business building, if you don't start it early, you're gonna run into troubles. And that's why in startup world we see a lot of teams changing and people leaving and so on, because this work hasn't done properly in the beginning. All right. Thoughts? Questions? I would really, especially on this team building topic, if you have any questions, we can go back to Sami's question about culture, about language, while you think about other questions. I don't know, Sami, if these kind of tools, what do you think? Do these help in building understanding about the cultures, maybe understanding if there's a language issue, and so on? If no, I would love for you to comment, and maybe if yes, too, you can use the chat. Others in the chat or in the audience, any questions?
There is typing happening again.
Ooh, nice. Typing is a promise of a good future. Oh, well, that's true. That's an assumption. Hannu, you got me assuming things immediately. I assumed, yes. And that's how it happens. Assumptions just happen without you realizing it.
Sami says, I'm sure they do, especially the last one with the ratings.
Yeah. If you would really want to consider these cultural and other more soft issues, you can add them. You can talk about softer skills. like illustrating something even more vague, like branding in a sense, or storytelling. If you think that one of the key aspects of your startup is how good of a story can you tell, how captivating of a story can you tell, then for sure you want to at some point add that to the tool and discuss who's the great storyteller, who should maybe take accountability for building our startup story. So that tool can be used in multiple ways.
Sami has his hand up, so we're going to take a listen on what he has to say, and I'm going to repeat
Nice.
it then.
Thanks, Sami. That's an excellent question.
Is it all right if I repeat the question?
Of course, please
Because it
do.
might not, the rest of the audience
Yes.
might not get it because of the tech thing. But more or less, the question is, how do you not build negative myths within your company? Thank you.
Sami, that's a great question. Actually, the lean startup process answers that. How you make sure that, let's say you create an experiment towards one customer segment, you get a result that they are not, for example, aware of the problem. But it might be that when something changes inside the startup or the idea changes a bit, that customer segment might really be the best place to go. So when you start experimenting with a lean startup methodology, what you have to do is, when you experiment things, you only change one variable at a time. So let's say I'm trying to find out if a certain customer segment, the football fans, has a certain problem with engagement of the football players that they are fans of. And I have this mobile app thought in my head. So if my initial idea gives a really kind of bad result, that none of them have this problem, what I have to do is the next experiment that I do, I only change one variable. So I either change the customer segment and keep the problem I'm trying to validate, or I change the problem a little bit and I use the same customer segment to validate. I don't change them both. If I change them both, I have no ability to backtrack that what worked and what didn't work. But with this changing one variable at a time, I can stop creating these myths in my head because there is a logic of how I do things. So same customer segment, I can test, for example, 5 different problems. Do they have A? Do they have B? Do they have C? And I'm not going to get attached with this methodology into thinking that after the first experiments that customer segment is just rotten for me, won't work ever. Sami, I hope I answered your question. Any other questions?
We just got a thumbs up from Sami. So
Okay.
yes, and thank you.
Good. And maybe continuing on Sami's question, if there's no other questions yet. The myths is a bit like, you could call them equivalent to assumptions, that you, based on something, you assume something else. And there again becomes the question of how much of self-awareness have you been practicing to be able to identify that is this just a belief of mine, a myth, or is it actually based on some metrics that I've either researched or I've gathered myself through experiments. So that's coming kind of back to the self-awareness part. Anybody else with questions? All right. No? Okay. In that case, from my side, I want to say thank you. And I want to remind you that all this is also available, almost all of this is also available in Housespace, in Business Oulu Housespace. So feel free to catch up with the Business Oulu people to get access to materials like these and a bunch of other things created by yours truly and Stephen Balian. All right. Thank you very much from my side. It was happy to be with you. And Laura.
Thank you very much, Oki. That was very insightful morning we had today. Thank you so much. I had a few ideas and topics that I want to really dig deeper into, and that's asking the customer the questions. What are they finding as a problem? I think that's a huge question. That's going to be my topic for the coming few days. And then how to build trust and trust with your team. That's quite good thought that I got from your workshop. And also the why. Why are we doing this? And that's my key takeaways from this morning. I bet the audience have their own key takeaways. So thank you, Oki. And we thank you all from Oulu and wish you a nice day. Thank you.